We saw earlier today during the Nielsen report that there is a lot of streaming being done for these events. So obviously Akamai Technologies is at a lot of the forefront of streaming and making sure that experience is good. So here for a case study on esports in the future, new business models and technology innovation, please welcome Nelson Rodriguez, Global Director of Media Industry Strategy.
Thank you. So I've got bad news and good news. The bad news is I'm hoping to make you all pretty uncomfortable. The good news is I only have 15 minutes, so there's a limit to what I can do. I think there's a dirty secret in esports that we should acknowledge. It's $1 billion business, but I like that. That's good. It's $1 billion business, but I've spent a lot of time with team owners, with players, with league executives, broadcasters, and behind closed doors, what they will admit is that the path to profit is not 100% clear. You know, it's exciting to talk about the potential, but the reality is that we're still stuck in a space where everybody's trying to make money, but it's not really that clear how to do it. And as we contemplate what to do next, I think it's important that we look back. That we look back at the road that took us to where we are today and the steps we've taken and even the stumbles. My own story in esports starts 10 years ago in a distant land called Redmond, Washington. I was in a conference room at a high-tech company. I won't name the company, but we were heavily invested in the gaming space. And I worked on a team who was responsible for building the relationship between the fans and the company. And we were in a conference room that looked pretty much like any conference room you've seen in a high-tech company, but 10 years later, I like to remember it as looking like the conference room on the Death Star. Can you imagine what getting that invite looks like? Like, oh my God, I gotta go meet with Emperor Palpatine. So we were in this conference room having a heated discussion about esports, but we didn't know that's what it was called at the time. We were talking about pro gaming, we were talking about game videos, spectating, and the core purpose of the discussion was to figure out how much we should be invested, how much time, how much money, how much effort. And there was a statement made during this meeting that has stuck with me 10 years later. It was a bold statement, and the statement was that nobody will ever sit in front of their computer and watch other people play games. Now, the thrust of the statement wasn't that there's no such thing as an interest in spectating. The idea was that if you had a machine in front of you that was fully capable of playing Call of Duty or playing Halo or playing Gears of War, then you would prefer to play that game and not watch, but you would watch if you were stuck on a bus or if you were stuck in an office or at school and you had a laptop in front of you. Now, one of the reasons why this particular quote really stuck with me is because I was the one who said it. So, look, to be fair to me, which I think is important, I was not alone in this perception. If you think about 10 years ago, 2008, there was no Twitch in its current form. YouTube had a few gaming videos, but there was nothing live, and it wasn't really high production value. And in fact, most of the companies, even some of the companies that you saw here, at that time were not invested in esports. A lot of the investment has come in the last 2 or 3 years, and 10 years ago, most of the companies sat on the sidelines. They made maybe small investments, but they didn't really throw themselves fully into it. And I think that it's important for us to reflect on that decision at that time, because we don't know right now what we're going to be laughing about in 10 years that we thought was true. We don't know about the assumptions we're making. And if you consider the game companies 10 years ago, the position they were in, they understood their business, they understood the model, they understood the players, and esports introduced this level of confusion that was just not that comfortable or easy to navigate. So what I want to talk about today are 3 key innovations that are happening today that are not really being talked about a lot. They're not something that we're working on directly. This is something that I've observed through meeting with dozens and dozens of companies, and I'm hoping that these innovations will help you think about what to do in the decisions you're making for the next 10 years. By the way, I was wrong by about 380 million people. Now, my argument is there are 7.5 billion people in the world, so I was 95% right that nobody would watch games. Now, the key, I think, for us to think about in esports today is the fact that our economic model in esports is fundamentally not innovative. We're doing in esports what traditional sports have done for a long time. This is a number studied by NewView. And what we see is esports is relying on sponsorship, advertising, ticket sales, merchandise. It could be said about any sport in the last 50 years. We're relying on tried and true models, and we're not doing really new things. And I think there's a problem there. And the problem is that we have an opportunity to deliver better relevance, better value, and more choice to esports fans than what we're doing today. And those are the three innovations that I'm going to talk about. First, I want to talk about the relevance of me, why I'm here. So, as you heard, my name is Nelson Rodriguez. I am responsible for media industry strategy at Akamai Technologies. Most of you will know Akamai is the world's largest and most distributed cloud delivery platform. We're also one of the largest security platforms in the world. And we are heavily invested in esports. We work with almost every major broadcaster in the world. We work with almost every major game publisher in the world. And of course, at that intersection, we also do a lot in esports. So that's why this is relevant to me. I'm not going to talk anymore about Akamai. If you want to talk about Akamai, we can do that after. First, I want to talk about the concept of relevance and how we can deliver more relevance. The reason this matters, I'm going to show you a map to tell you why it matters. This is a map indicating the penetration of ad blocker usage in countries around the world. The darkest orange represents 25% penetration. So as you see, the United States, Canada, Australia, India, really high ad block usage, and this represents the entire population, not just the 18 to 40-year-old population, which is what we're very interested in. So when we talk about the fans that are being lost to traditional sport, a lot of these folks overlap. Now, we can debate the ethics of ad blocking, but that's not my concern today. My concern today is that this map is a referendum on what they're receiving in terms of ads, in terms of how relevant or useful it is to them. And that's, to me, something that we can fix. They talked about data just a few minutes ago. We have the power to do it, and we're not doing it well enough. I'll give you a personal story to prove this. Last year, I bought a motorcycle. It was a 750cc, twin-engine, liquid-cooled, upright riding stance, so you could ride on road and off-road. And as you can imagine, before I bought it, I did a lot of research online, which meant I left behind a cookie trail that allowed me to be targeted. And the marketing that I saw was reasonably good. It was 70% accurate. It was often a bike size that I wasn't interested in. Maybe there were dealerships that they were showing me that weren't close to my house, but generally speaking, it was relevant. And all of that broke in August last year. It went from decently relevant to zero relevance. It was a Saturday morning. I was taking a ride to the Atlantic Ocean, and it was misty out, which I thought was pretty cool. Turned out that wasn't so cool. But I started to make a left-hand turn in a very small town, and the bike and I had a disagreement about which direction we should be headed in. And the bike slipped from under me. I smashed to the ground, and everything went black. I don't want to spoil the story. I did survive. In fact, I got right up and took this photo. That's not true. That photo was taken before the accident. But I was actually injured, mildly injured. I received a concussion on the right side of my head. I ended up going directly to the hospital. And of course, because I didn't want to call my wife, I took an Uber home. And I was about an hour away from home. In the Uber, I took out the phone and I started researching again, but my research had changed. I was researching three things. The first was how to recover from a concussion. The second was new armor to buy. And the third was actually how to sell my motorcycle. But the ads didn't change. I kept seeing the same ads for giant motorcycles, for adventure tours. I had instantly changed. And in fact, what I was doing in the moment had changed. But my cookie trail hadn't changed. This idea of a demographic profile that I fit hadn't changed. So the ads that I was seeing had zero relevance to me. In fact, they were harmful to my relationship with the content that I was consuming. That is something that can be changed. I actually saw a demo. I like the idea of going from a brain to a brain. It's like a real brain, fake brain. 2 years ago, I saw a demo with IBM. They were running an AI program in partnership with Akamai, where they were monitoring frame by frame what was being consumed in a video. and we were dynamically loading ads into it to match the keywords that were matching what was on the video. It was an experiment, but it's something that could be done today and we're not doing enough of. I would say, even if you delivered perfect relevance to everyone, everything that you showed them was exactly what you were hoping to show them, of course there are going to be some people who are skeptical or who, for whatever reason, don't feel like you're delivering value to them. I think there's another innovation happening that is, I think, exciting in this space. There's a company called Sliver.tv. This happens to be one of many companies doing something similar, but Sliver I thought was interesting because they're focused specifically on esports. They're using blockchain, which should also be a drinking word, I would imagine. I don't know if this is the first time having said it today, but they're using blockchain to simplify the process of creating very tiny transactions that allow viewers of ads to receive token value for their time, because we have to admit the viewer's time is worth something. That value is being transmitted to the viewer, and they can then use it to consume specific content, or in this case, to wager on the outcome of matches. And it doesn't convert into cash value, but there's like unlockables or goodies that they can get as a result of the outcomes of those wagers. This allows a kind of a value transfer that's different from what we're doing today. And before you question it, think about the fact that my son buys dance moves on Fortnite. You know, like 5 years ago, I don't think any of us would have said, for sure, that market's going to be driven $300 million a month by dance moves. 12-year-olds buying dance moves. So the idea there, in my Fortnite example, is that it wasn't obvious what value was going to mean to the consumer, to the player, but experimenting with it unlocked something really exciting. And I think what Sliver is doing, and several companies are doing, creates additional opportunity to do something like that. Now, the last topic is the topic of choice. Choice in gaming, I think, is really important. The idea of agency in gaming is part of what is so attractive about gaming for a typical player. But that really doesn't happen in terms of spectators. And there's a company called Genvid that's doing something exciting there. I met with Genvid at E3 this year when we were talking about cloud gaming. Genvid emerged from some leaders out of Square Enix, and what they built is kind of is horrifying and exciting and interesting. They're building a platform that will allow game developers to include interaction for spectators. So spectators will be able to make decisions that might influence matches, like, for example, map selection, or the introduction of bonuses or boosts for certain teams or players, or even the introduction of PvE experiences in a PvP match. This is, may sound crazy, but my son is 12. He loves video games and he loves soccer. I think that there's going to come a time in 10 years where he looks at soccer and says, this is such a boring sport to watch. I don't get to make any decisions. I don't get to do anything. I just sit back. If companies like Genvid are able to create successful experiments, we may find that all sport changes, that the way we think of traditional sport changes. And consider the fact, I was in Sydney, Australia recently talking to a couple of the pro rugby teams and Aussie Rules football teams that had invested in esports teams. And something that they're really interested in is this giant gap in viewers. So the fans of the traditional sports basically are 40 years and older and 12 years and younger, or something in that range. And in the middle, they're all missing. This idea is, how do we capture them? How do we find them? I would argue we don't find them by just doing the same thing over again. I would argue we find them by trying meaningful new things. And the technology exists now. You will have heard lots of discussion about tried and true models. You will know that a lot of the money is coming from traditional sports, traditional broadcasters, which means traditional approaches. But I don't think that's the only opportunity in front of us. And I think if you sit down and talk with the folks who are struggling to find the path to profit, you'll see that that's the case. Again, we have an opportunity to change the relationship with the audience. We can change it through delivering better relevance so that we don't assume that 75% of people are going to hate the ads. We can deliver better value by saying, we recognize that your time, your attention matters, and we're going to let you feel some of that value. And we can innovate in how we deliver choice. Not just that you get to sit back, but that you get to make decisions, that you get to be involved beyond just social media. And if we can do that, then I think we won't have any problem going from $1 billion to $100 billion, and everybody in the room will have an opportunity to make meaningful money at it. I'm going to be around for the rest of the show. I would love to answer any questions. I would actually really be happy to debate this topic, because then I can use it for future talks, whatever you share with me. Thank you.